and hear what we're about.
All right. Yeah. Let's do it.
Thanks for the clap. Go ahead.
Welcome back to Armor Radio. Josh here with Dusty.
Hey, man.
Thank you for being here.
Yeah, it's always good.
We have an interesting topic today. We're going to chat about low back pain, low back dysfunction, but we're going to come at it from a little bit of a different spot. So, Dusty, you and I have been working with athletes with back issues for quite a while.
Yeah.
Oftentimes, I'd say probably more often, it's from somebody who's been sedentary.
Yep.
They haven't been doing much, and that's been for a really long time. So it could be it's 10 years, 2 decades, haven't done much. We get to greet them with just an open canvas.
Yeah.
And we get to start painting on that.
Expose them to a new world.
Yeah, and that's great.
Yeah.
And I don't want to say that that's easy by any means, and I don't
Right.
want to diminish that because it sucks to have back pain, especially shoulder pain's a little different. Shoulder, it seems a little easier to get a hold of. Same thing with the knee. Yeah, it hurts. Yeah, it sucks to be in pain at all. But it seems to be a little bit more of a linear path.
Yeah, I kind of feel like some of those other joints, people, for whatever reason, they're not as fearful to move, to keep moving. The shoulder, the knee, the ankle. But there's something about the back that,
There is.
like, it
As soon as it
locks
goes
you down.
weird, it's
Yeah.
real weird. But that's what we're talking about. We're talking about, like, what if it's somebody like you? So not the sedentary athlete, but the athlete who's been hitting it 5 days a week
Yeah.
for 20 plus years, who's been active, and then all of a sudden that athlete is just completely hemmed up. And it's just a global lower back dysfunction. We won't say exactly what it is unless you have specific things that you've seen before. But what I wanted to ask you about, so let's say that I'm that guy, been lifting for 20 years, and then all of a sudden my back will say goes out. Where do you start athletes at, and how do we look at that recovery?
Yeah, so I would say with somebody who has a much longer background, more experience, I'm really gonna start from the beginning and talk about the warm up. Like, how are they warming up?
Yeah.
What are they are they warming up just even efficiently and correctly? And a lot of times I think that's something that we uncover right at the beginning, is that there's just not much intentionality being put in to their warm up.
So this is like, so let's say that this is a guy who's not went to a doctor. This is like a you or me, like we got hurt and now something's bad, but that's gonna be last case scenario.
Yep.
They're gonna come to you. Now you're saying the first thing you do is start talking to this guy about what did you do to warm up and what are you doing to warm up?
Yeah, what do your existing warm ups look like?
Okay.
And then that'll kind of lay some groundwork on, just what sessions look like for them. So it could be that there's maybe an improper warm-up or not a very specific warm-up, or it's not unusual to see no warm-up.
100%.
So people just kind of, come in, bend down, touch their toes a few times and start, gripping and ripping. So.
And a warm-up's not, it's not deadlifts are on the board today, so I just deadlift a little lighter. That's
Right.
not really a warm-up. Like,
Right.
we're talking about something that may be multi-joint, maybe isolation.
Yeah.
But specifically, it leads you to that deadlift.
Yep.
But it's not just a little bit lighter.
No.
There are specific components that you would normally have in a warm-up? Or are there general ones, or are they always different?
Well, one of the things that me personally, I like to start with just some foam rolling, just to kind of push some blood into the muscles that I'm going to be training.
Yep.
And then go right into a little bit more of a dynamic warm up, but hitting the muscles that I'm again going to be working in the. So if it's if it is a back a hinge day, low body pull, then I'm going to really be intentional about warming up my hamstrings.
Okay.
Warming up the glutes.
Do you warm these up in isolation, or do you warm them up? You said dynamic,
Both.
which generally means compound.
But
But
I probably would start, like, typically, because I foam roll, then I start out on the floor, and then I'll hit some, isolation, holds, isometric holds.
Got it.
Just trying to really just loosen things up,
Are you a fan of like a static stretching in this instance, and not necessarily in the I'm good to go, but in the I'm dysfunctional right now? Are you a fan of static stretching, or is it dependent upon the person?
Yeah, I would say it more dependent on the person. But once you get into the warm up, then with that athlete, I think that's where we would start to really look at the movement pattern.
Oh, okay.
So let's see if there's any little nuances that are potentially off, that the movement pattern is flawed in some way, and that could be potentially what's aggravating the back.
So you're a movement expert. So when you watch this, you're going to watch for tissue restriction through movement pattern. Are you also going to watch for just inappropriate movement? Is there something specific you're looking for?
Well, typically what I'll do the first session is I'll just have that person, show me a hinge.
Okay.
And let's let them, without me cueing or really saying, hey, here's what I want you to do.
100%.
I want to see you do it.
Does a hinge look like a hinge?
Right. And let's just see, based off of them doing what they think they should be doing or how they think that it should be done, just let them move,
Yep.
and then you can kind of get a good feel for what if there is a flaw there, that's something that maybe can be cleaned up.
Yeah.
And it could even be in having them start to move around a little bit. You do uncover some of those like restrictions or sticking points, or you can also identify where do you feel the pain. Is it at the bottom of an RDL? Is it at the top?
Yeah.
Is it at the knee? Where are we really feeling these pain points? And then that just kind of helps also, your decision on, all right, how we're going to do, how are we going to remedy this? How are we going to work around it, train through it? And so after you've seen them move, then I would say the next step would be the bracing and breathing on the lift. So really slowing that process down. And now let's look at before you begin the hinge, what are you trying to activate?
So this may be an athlete who, this is what you've seen a lot of, is that athletes don't know how to brace appropriately, and then that has created a movement dysfunction.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah,
okay.
And I think it's just more what you do as an athlete and experienced lifter is you just get into the routine.
So much so that you're just kind of going through the motions and
Yeah,
you're not
you've
trying
just
as
done
hard?
it so much that you're not, some of those little details, they're easy to overlook.
Especially when it comes to breathing.
Breathe. Oh, for
Especially
sure.
when it comes to breathing.
And you almost, like even for me, I have to video myself and then watch the video before I even realize that my breathing is, it's not the way that it should be.
That's an interesting point. So I was going to ask you, if I don't have a you that can watch me move.
Yep.
You're saying film yourself
Yep.
and then watch it move, because you might not be able to feel where you're at in space, but you could probably see if your hinge looked a lot more like a squat.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, you can
That's
really
good.
start to break down some movement patterns, and then again, if you've got some pain in a certain area, I think if you're kind of coaching yourself, then you can look at that movement, stop it in that position, and really kind of check it to see, all right, what could potentially be off here.
So what's interesting that I think, I don't want to take you off where you're at. I like where we're going with it, but the whole point up until now, you haven't taken movement away.
No.
You've moved more. We're going to do this. We're going to see you move. It's been move, move, move. When we were talking about this, when you have back pain, it's almost like you're scared to move.
Yep.
So how do you mentally overcome that with an athlete who's been doing stuff for their entire life? They've been athletic.
Yep.
Or does that overcome it for them? Is it more of the sedentary person who's scared to death, but the athlete's willing? You just need to encourage them to keep moving.
Yeah, I think with athletes it is a little easier because their experience, it's probably not the first time that they've ran into a little ache or pain.
Mm-hmm.
So and they've, for whatever reason, been able to train through that. So they already kind of have a history on, like, I can do this, but maybe this one is a little different. It feels different,
Yeah.
or it's taking longer. But I don't think there's that mental block to where they're like, no, I can't hinge.
So yours is more
Hinging
just
is-
keep encouraging them to move. Do you take down the volume? Like, you're talking to them and I work out 5 days a week. Do you take days out, or do you simply remove intensity?
I think all those. It could be all those. I think those are just some of the things that you'll uncover through just some questions of how many days a week are you training?
Yeah.
How
Yeah.
often are you deadlifting?
If I was to watch a video of myself and add in the feel
Yeah.
of it, and I felt like I was restricted in some of the movements, would you say that is where I start at? Is that restriction feeling as far as my recovery goes? So if I start to, let's say, reach down to the ground for a deadlift and I feel tons and tons of tightness in the posterior chain,
Yeah.
is that range of motion restriction where you would like to start at? Or should we start at more trying the bracing? Or is it just a both the same time kind of thing?
Yeah, I'd probably look into the range of motion first.
Okay.
Let's try to figure out why that we feel that restriction.
So if
in
I video
whatever
myself
position it is,
and
yeah.
I feel that restriction, that's a good indicator of something to push into, not something to run from.
Yeah, and it doesn't mean load it, necessarily heavier.
That's a good point.
What we need to do is really just back up a little bit. So if let's say that we're feeling this restriction, at the very bottom of the RDL.
Okay.
And so what we've been doing is trying to train through it, and we're still trying to hit those percentages and loading and loading and loading and loading. And then maybe what we need to do for just a little bit is maybe we don't need to be pressing into that extra 2 inches or whatever it is that we're feeling that restriction in.
Okay.
Maybe we create a stop point.
Okay.
And so, maybe we're just not hinging as low.
Okay.
Just for, a brief window.
So one easy way to look at this that I think seems just maybe a little less nuanced would be if I felt pain in the bottom of my squat, I could squat to a box and that takes it out. So I still keep getting range.
Right.
I just might not look for full range under load.
Yep.
Okay.
Let's back it up.
Got it.
We change the height a little bit.
And with an RDL saying that might be challenging, maybe I put that on blocks or on bumpers and start pulling to that, have targets.
And then what that's going to allow you to do is you can now check in at a little bit of a higher position and make sure that, that's where the bracing piece can come in. Are we losing tension?
So you can re-brace them while they're down, like get them down into position and then find a way to organize at the bottom position or at the stretch position of the lift.
Yep, and at that point where we're losing it, let's see if we can take a little bit of the tension out and then work to see if we can create that more organically.
Got it. So what you're saying, I make sure that I make sure that my warm up is specific and it's an actual warm up.
I would say that's probably the biggest one. I think warm ups.
Is that
you got to spend 30 minutes doing a warm up? But
that's what I was gonna say. How long does it take?
I feel like a good 10-minute warm up.
Okay.
If you're 10 to 15 minutes, you got that time. I think that's great. You can be efficient and do what needs to be done and in that window of time. I think where people mess up is they go right to it.
Okay. Got it.
And they, like you said, they consider those first two kind of warm up build sets as their warm up.
Right.
And you're just hopping to it, and then they're doing their lift, and then they're jetting out, hopping in the car and driving 45 minutes.
That's a whole other thing.
Exactly.
The behavior
and
that
you keep
surrounds
doing
it.
that. I think that's where your experienced athlete, they just bump into those hurdles a little bit more, and it's just you've gotten so comfortable that you've just skipped the first step.
Yeah.
And so just dial it back a little bit. Let's get into the warm up. Let's look at the bracing.
Yep.
And just making sure that we are breathing.
Yep.
And that we're creating tension before we start to move.
Yep. And then we reduce range of motion potentially.
Reduce range of motion.
Reduce loading to maybe nothing, maybe just less.
And maybe volume.
So the days of the week we may cut days, or we may just have them move less intensely through the days.
Yep.
So those are some of the first things that we'll do. What would be some of the other things that you would see out of a back? Do you, for instance, do you do less hinging but not avoid hinging and opt for more squatting? Do you, and this may be too specific and just let me know if it is, or do you have them, is it more of I need to be in a seated position like on a incline press as opposed to a standing press? Am I trying to, if I'm not compression intolerant, do I opt for those? Are those some things that you could make to keep the system going? Do I do floor presses instead of standing presses?
Belt squats. Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of things that
Yeah.
you can do there.
And belt squat would be to keep the compression off of me, to
Right.
put it on my hips. What about being upright? Like, do I do more movements being in an upright torso as opposed to a hinge? Again, I'm not neglecting the movement, but I'm trying to do as many movements as I can that are non-threatening while I'm recovering that.
Yep. And I would tell you, too, some things that, one that I see pretty common is we do a lot of flexion. We're doing a lot of hinging, pulling, but we're not getting much extension
Ooh, okay.
in that low back.
So what would you do to do that?
Reverse hyper.
Oh, okay. So a big Louis Simmons fan.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So
Awesome.
I think that's probably the most underutilized piece of equipment.
Really? Okay, the reverse hyper, okay.
Maybe in armor gym.
So explain to us what the reverse hyper is for our listeners, if you can walk us through a mental model for people that aren't watching.
Well,
this.
like you said with the compression. So
Yep.
you take the compression
Yep.
off the spine.
Yep.
You've now, and you don't even, like one that I really like, especially with somebody who is in a lot of pain, is I won't even use the
feet.
arm
Yeah.
from the hyper. I've used bands. And
so accommodating resistance?
Yep.
Okay.
Attach bands to a dumbbell
okay.
a plate on the ground, and just allow. It's a little bit more of a consistent.
So they get
tension.
feedback.
Yeah,
Okay.
throughout the movement.
That's a good idea.
And then you're basically just squeezing the quad, keeping the knee locked out, and then raising the feet up to where you get into that.
Finding a way to bring yourself into true hip extension because you did it. It wasn't passive. You
Exactly.
actually had to do it, and then you'll see the pelvis kind of go anterior and posterior.
Yep. And then you're hitting those spinal erector muscles.
Have you found athletes? Have you found athletes that when they're on the reverse hyper, there's it's like a love it or leave it entirely,
Well,
or does
I
everybody
find,
seem to do well?
You know, man, I don't recall anybody that hasn't done well on it. But I would tell you that the first time, there is a lot of
There's a learning curve.
Yeah, and reluctancy to try it.
Yeah.
Especially if there's somebody who is dealing with or working through pain. When I take them there and show them exactly what we're going to be doing, I get a lot of weird, looks.
I love Louis. I loved all the stuff he did. He was a great guy. God rest his soul. Just a cool human.
Yeah.
But on that machine, that's the one I've seen a love it or leave it.
Yeah.
And it's always been but it's exactly that. It's like people who have
I think it's just more of it's
patience, right?
Yeah.
You got to be patient with it.
You got to be patient. It's unfamiliar.
Very unfamiliar.
So I think people just, because they maybe don't understand it, they just kind of
How
stay
would I
away
know
from
if I
it.
was that? Is this a extension intolerant or is this a lacking extension?
Well, I think here's the thing. I think how do you know if you're extension intolerant would be, first I would say try that lying on the ground.
Okay, so like a Superman.
Yeah, prone position.
Got it.
And then that'll give you an opportunity, no loading. You just feel it.
Yeah.
Feel it from the floor, see how you feel. And then from there you can take it to the hyper. Now you've got a greater range of motion.
100%.
And then you could look to build strength, in that position by either using bands or adding
Is this a
weight.
tolerable thing? Do I do it as much as tolerable, or do I have it set into training I need to do this twice a week or once a week for that reverse hyper specifically?
Yeah, I typically I'd try to get it in once or twice.
Once or twice a week?
At least once. It's something that in my own personal training, I try to get it in at least once a week.
Okay. What are some other movements? So that's a great one. A reverse hyper is fantastic. You talked about warming up and bracing. Are there any other movements that you feel that are well to include in a back rehab program for somebody who has been working out? That you generally see.
I think that another one that I would love to see people utilizing more is the Nordic curl.
Ooh, okay. Okay. What is it about that you're talking about somebody's holding my legs or I'm on one of the machines that we have. What are those machines called? What is the name of those? Do you remember? I can't remember.
The brand?
Yeah. Do you remember the brand?
Is it Athlete Freak or Freak Athlete or something?
Freak Athlete.
Freak Athlete. So
yeah.
the Freak Athlete things that we,
have is Westside.
Yeah, that's
which is a
Westside.
fantastic
Amazing.
piece of equipment.
And that's a good way right
Fantastic
there.
piece of
At
equipment.
Armor, we have a very unique setup because that way you can understand what you're trying to do on the,
And I have never seen that
Westside.
machine anywhere other than Westside.
and very rarely do you see anybody on it.
Yeah.
Because again, it's one of those that it's like there's a few different moving parts to it that
It's-
I don't
yeah.
think people fully
It's a
understand how to
challenge.
utilize it. But that's a great place to start. Then once you understand what you're trying to do, and you've built some kind of prerequisite strength, then you could take it to the floor.
Where we're
unit.
usually starting with like maybe you could do the Freak Athlete ones. We could hook bands up and do that.
Yep.
You could do the catch where you actually do as much of the eccentric as you can.
Hold
What is
it.
it about that movement that you enjoy for back recovery? Because I feel like maybe not for an athlete, but if you took anybody else, you'd be like, hey, this is what I'm gonna have you do. They're gonna be like, no way.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, no way.
Just like take a Sorensen hold for
Oh,
example.
no way. Yeah.
That's another one that you
Just immediate apprehension.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
It's like what?
So what is it that you like about that? Is it just the strengthening the posterior chain?
Well, I
is
think
it that you really got a brace? Because there ain't nobody that does that without being tight.
Well, I think it just the way that it hits your hamstrings
Okay.
and really the glutes.
Yeah.
It feels different.
Okay.
It just hits different
Yeah.
than say a hinge pattern.
Yep.
Again, it gives you. It's just a nice movement to put in that I think it just accommodates
Yeah.
some of the other things that we're already doing.
Okay.
Not to
yeah.
mention, one of the things about those Nordics too is just the knee.
Yeah.
Improving, just knee health and knee stability. So, again, it's great for your hamstrings, glutes, your back, but you're also getting some other, building some joint health and
Yeah, totally.
in the knee as
So
well.
there's a big sort of
Carryover.
globally.
Yeah, there's a carryover there
Yeah.
that I think is it's beneficial. Everybody's looking for the most bang for their buck when it comes to
100%.
moving. So
100%. Now, so there's a couple of pieces that we have. What's another one that you start to scale into? Then that's an interesting one because you have your reverse, which is supporting the torso.
Yep.
And then you have your Nordic, which is the opposite of that.
Yep.
Right. So the lower body is engaged. What's another one that you start to use regularly in your program if you've had back dysfunction that would normally come up in your program?
Well, so another one that I like that I incorporate quite a bit in, and to help, again, now we're talking, we've got some momentum, and we're starting to move the needle. If we go back to the range of motion, that maybe that's what we kind of dealing with a little bit of restriction there. I really like a seated good morning. A
Do you
banded,
find that the range of motion out of that is from the back, or do you find that that's from the hip?
well, I think you're gonna.
Is it dependent on the guy?
Right, because I think it could be you're gonna learn a lot on that one.
That's a nice way of saying it.
Because you can widen out the stance on like a seated good morning,
100%.
and then there you can start to feel some hip things, and if it is the hip, all right, now we can start to incorporate some other things in there.
So now you're talking about if I did another
99s.
movement that didn't if I did another movement that didn't feel threatening, but felt bound up in certain tissue, then that's a signal for me to go at that. So you feel it in the hips.
Yeah,
like you
it
said,
could
do
be
some
that what
99s.
you got going on in your back is actually related to your hip,
There we go. Yeah, there we go.
and I would say that's very common.
So find movements that challenge different parameters and pathways so that you can start to work on those specific things that may not even look like the
And
back.
it might not be your back.
Could
it
be
your
hip.
psoas. It could be
Yep, 100%.
in the hip. So, yeah.
So, okay, we got a lot of the gym stuff. I like all of that. I think all of that is usable. What is it in my daily life that I could improve? Is there anything that you see that's glaring across the board of the athlete? Now, you said one already. You come and you do your workout, and you get right in the car and you drive 45 minutes.
And when you say sitting,
Sitting, okay.
Yeah.
So stand more. might be the
I
thing?
think stand every opportunity that you get.
Okay. Do you find it beneficial for every athlete to have a certain maintenance routine? Like, for instance, do you have to do 10 minutes of mobility every night? Do you have to do 1 minute for every year you're alive? Like, is there any?
I definitely feel better when I do mobility at night.
Okay. Okay.
And again, I think yes, I don't think if you have the time and you can spend 30 minutes doing it, well, good for you. But 10 minutes, I think, can be just very rewarding for you and will definitely help you to feel better and recover more quickly.
Yeah.
And if you're that guy that if you're training 5 days a week, I would say you almost have to be doing some mobility, or you're gonna. It's just a matter of time before you're gonna hit that wall. You're not recovering, or you're just constantly dealing with aches and pains.
Because we're talking about even getting just the lymphatic system to process metabolic waste.
Yep.
Do you look at steps? Like if you have an athlete that, would turn in their steps to you at the end of every day and it's like a couple thousand and you're like, oh man, we got to take that up to at least 8. I think I think
10.
what we're looking for is 8. I think was the last study that came out, if I remember right. It says 8 was the...
I think there's some value there for sure because it gives you just a snapshot into how much somebody is sitting around.
That's why I wanted to bring that up. I feel like a lot of us that do this part, we think we're doing, and maybe I'm talking about myself, but I think I'm doing really, really good. It's like I'm getting the hour and a half worth of activity and it's hard and it's heavy. And then it's like, let's recover and not do anything. Or you focus on the job because you love what you do and that's great. But that might not have you doing a lot of activity. So you're saying you might need to be intentional about the workout and then intentional about the recovery.
Well, and I think if you are somebody who your job requires you to sit for long periods of times, I think you just need to have it scheduled to where you can get up and you can move around and you can do some, just some dynamic movement, knee tucks.
So it's like body your job. 20 minutes on.
I mean, yeah, when I travel, I have to. It's like every time I'm getting gas, I'm out doing, air squats and I'm at least doing some hinging just to keep my body, loose and moving. So, I think it just depends on what you do. And if it is a situation where you're there for an extended period of time, you almost, and if it's setting an alarm that tells you, hey, all right, it's your time. You got to get up, move around, do some squats. Maybe it's do some hinging, whatever it is that you need to do. But I think it will definitely help you feel better if you move more and sit less.
So if I'm an athlete that's working through some back issues, my first thing is look at my warm up. My second thing is look at some bracing and some breathing. We can count those as 2. We can count them as separate ones, but make sure I'm breathing right and make sure I'm bracing correctly. Then I'm going to look at maybe reducing range of motion, maybe reducing volume.
Yep.
But still working out with as many non-threatening exercises as I can while I'm in the gym. Yep. I don't want to not do the things. I want to do as many of the things that I can that don't hinder my recovery. And then I want to make sure that I'm moving around as much as possible when I'm not in the gym.
Yep.
Dusty, thank you for your time.
Yeah, man. Thank you.